I'm Abigail, and this year I went to Prince Edward Island, a place I've always wanted to go to ever since I discovered Anne of Green Gables as a kid. It was like the one item on my bucket list. So for my 30th birthday, I went on a solo trip, and I want to tell you about it. So first off, logistics. I ended up flying into Halifax and renting a car because I knew I was going to have to drive around the island anyway. In years past, they had actually run out of rental cars if you fly directly into the island, so I would have more options in Halifax. I also wanted to see some sites in Dalhousie because that is where L.m.Montgomery went to school. And so I was able to go to the one building that the school used to be, and it's now where they have their nursing school. It was also a lot more cost effective to go through Halifax rather than flying into the island. I pre-downloaded Google Maps of the area beforehand. I also got an eSIM that still gets activated by maps because of like assessing traffic and whatnot. I paid like $15 via Sally, and that 15 actually lasted for the whole week, so that was great. The great thing about the Halifax airport is that there is a hotel in it, so my flight arrived at 2 a.m. and as a solo female traveler, it was very comforting to be in a smaller style airport that I could go directly to the hotel and check in and just like basically crash after traveling all day. And also going from the US to Vancouver was one of the best connecting airports because your bag is just like checked right through, and they're just very familiar with that whole process. So going in and out of Vancouver was also it turned out great. So my first day in Halifax, I drove around. I went to the Botanic Gardens, which is where Maud wrote one of the first pieces of writing she ever got positive feedback on from a professor. She went to the Botanic Garden, sat around, got inspired, and wrote that for a class when she was at Dalhousie. Understandably, the buildings where she actually lived no longer exist, but she did live near the wharf, so I drove down there. There happened to be like an Asian food festival right there, so I walked her in there, which was great. And Halifax is a gorgeous harbor town. So the drive from Halifax to Prince Edward Island took about 3 to 4 hours. I went up the bridgeway and back the ferryway. So going up, I was able to stop. There's plenty of grocery stores to stock up and get some fun Canadian snacks. I will warn you that the bridge into the island is terrifying. It is just 2 lanes, like one each way, and the railing seems really short, and you're just driving, and it's like the longest bridge over ice or something in that northern area. There's some kind of claim to fame that it has, but I feel pretty neutral about driving over bridges. But halfway through, I was like, it took me like 20 minutes to get across going like the speed limit. By the way, I didn't have any prior Canadian driving experience, and I found it very easy to, it was very comparable to US driving because the car was also like defaulted to kilometers per hour. That's really the biggest thing. Drive on the right, pretty much the same rules as well. So that was actually really easy. Also, the drive there was gorgeous, pretty straightforward highways to get there. And also driving on the island was amazing. So even though this can be a road trip heavy destination, the country roads, it's just, you just look around like in awe at the rolling hills. Like I totally get why people are potato farmers and settled down in this location. Someone who grew up in Ohio, I was like, these farms might be a bit superior. I stayed at 3 places in the island. I did 2 nights at each place. In hindsight, I kind of wish I stayed at one place longer. I have no regrets. It's just I have to go back. That's just what that means. But for my first place, I stayed at an Airbnb that was actually only a room within a house. But the way that it was set up was really great because you got the whole second story, and it was in this old creaky farmhouse, felt almost like haunted, which is exact vibes I was going for. I wanted to get kind of like as close as I could get to what Maud might have lived in, and that house has been there forever. The landscaping was also biodiversity, so the host was telling me more about it, that it's just maintained and kept to promote biodiversity of the area, so it's not actually used for like farming or anything like that, so they can be limited on what they can do with it. But she was able to mow down pathways for guests, and I was able to walk down to a nice little creek or river, maybe river's a stretch, and I was really by myself there. But it, again, easing into like one of my first trips ever by myself, it was nice to know that I was going to be at a place where like someone would notice I was missing. just, catastrophizing here. I knew I wanted to do the Anne stuff right away, just in case there something happened and I could have the whole rest of the week to like make up for it. So I was near Cavendish. So my first day, stopped at this place, had a wonderful brunch. Their coffee baristas, I cannot recommend enough. I had really good food on this island, by the way. And I highly recommend the package of all the places. Honestly, even if you don't use it, it's a really great running list just to make sure you hit all the spots. I actually almost missed going to the Heritage Place where I went last. A lot of people go to the Heritage Place first, but I will explain why I'm happy that I didn't. The first place I really wanted to go to was the Green Gables Museum. I feel like that place is the one that's most recognizable when you Google Prince Edward Island because they have that big barn with the green lettering. So this is the park corner, which was her aunt and uncle's house. It has a parlor where she was married, and a lot of the furniture is actually original furniture to the place. This place was very, very special to her. She got very inspired. Her Emily series is attributed to this place. Honestly, like all of her books are attributed to Prince Edward Island in general. So just some of the descriptions, match up. I knew I was going to get emotional and I was going to cry. And that definitely happened, especially with how wonderful this place is set up. And I got really lucky that I was there by myself. So they have not tour guides necessarily, like the entry people at the very front of the house. But they're just stationary. They just stay there and you can explore on your own. And there's placards that are very, well described. You go to see the cabinet where, the Katie inspiration was. Maud's best friend, that matches Anne's best friend and the reflection of the mirror. And then being in that parlor where she got married. So as a super fan, the lady at the entrance, taking tickets, it kind of made me laugh because she was like, some people have come here that got married in the same room, and she was so excited for me to go to this parlor, like thinking that I was going to think it was romantic. Me being a super fan, having read the biography, read the snippets from her diaries, that by the way, she did want to be published, so she did want this to be known, that the day after she got married, she wrote that if she could take it all back, she could. She very much regretted having to go forward with that relationship, but there was propriety back in that day. She made an agreement. He waited years and years for her when she took care of her grandma, but her wedding day was not a happy day, and also it was the time where she was leaving the island at 36. So that also made it emotional for me to be in that space. I feel like you could just really feel her spirit there. Like, I'm probably projecting a ton on this, but it really did mean a lot to me. There's also one of the last letters she ever wrote before she died about how much she wanted to go back to this place. So I think that also gives an emphasis on the emotions. But they have wonderful first editions of a lot of the books behind cases, and nothing's roped off, which is nice. Upstairs there were some quilts that she happened to make, so I really liked all that little like homemaking details that were there too. And then obviously the whole other part of it, like where the barn is, where the Lake of Shining Waters is, there's a gazebo, there's places to sit, was also wonderful. There's a little miniature trail in the back that isn't Lover's Lane, but it is it felt very inspiring to be there. It felt like I was in the books. And the gift shop is also probably one of the best ones that I went to. I really went knowing that I wasn't expecting to get many gifts or souvenirs. I feel like these days you can get a lot online, or there's like Etsy crafters that I have stuff that I would like more. But I did like the gift shop there. Did not eat at the cafe because it wasn't open, so can't comment on that, but nice that they had a bathroom, especially if you're going there for l.m.montgomery stuff. I do recommend that package because otherwise each entrance fee for a lot of the places on the list are around $10, so you do end up saving money. So someone who's maybe a more casual fan, you probably wouldn't want to go to all the places. For example, when you go to her birthplace, one of the best things about that place is that they happen to have a lot of scrapbooks she made that are out in the first floor of that house. Does not really necessarily related because she only lived in that birthplace for maybe 22 months, but there is the room where she was born. There's a lot of information about, what her mother and father went through. And so for me, of course, I was going to do all the things, but I could see, someone else wouldn't want to do the package for those reasons, but highly recommend. All of the Cavendish spots are very close together. There is a touristy place called Avonlea Village, and I didn't stop there because tourist season wasn't fully ramped up. There's really nothing necessarily like significant historically there, but it seems like a great place for families, would be a great place to stop for food or ice cream, that kind of thing. So two other major places are going to be the site of her home, which is like the homestead. It has the bare bones of, I don't know what you want to call it, like the plot of where the house was unfortunately destroyed for a reason. Basically, the site of her home was torn down by her uncle, who resented her success, never read her books, whatever. And even in the early 1900s, when the book was very popular, people were coming to the island. It was an empty house and they were vandalizing it. It was becoming a hazard. And so basically there was the opportunity of, do you want to turn this into a tourist spot, or do you want to tear it down, because people are going to come in and just keep hurting themselves, burglarizing it, that kind of thing. And he decided to take it down. So that's why some people will leave negative reviews being disappointed that it's just like a plot in the ground. But at the same time, it is a maintained area, and there's still like beautiful rolling hill views, which is nice because it's like, I totally get that there's a gas station like near her gravesite, and that's just different than what she pictured for herself when she picked out her gravesite. That it's fine, but I just want to say that I still found, you know, a lot of like peace and beauty in just that plot of land. There is a separate combo ticket that is less expensive for that place and the heritage site. So the heritage site is set nationally. It actually was made national while she was still alive, which I think is really cool. It has changed a lot over the years, understandably. And one thing I didn't realize since I went to the heritage place last is that the Haunted Wood Trail does pop you out where you can go to the very small park that is dedicated to her. It has a statue of her, and you can walk from there to her gravesite. It's all just like right there across a really small like country road. And even from the park, there's a very short trail that goes to that homestead, the plot in the ground where she lived, like the site of her home where she lived with her grandparents. So that is an option as well, to know that you could park just at the heritage place, walk through the haunted wood, go through all of those things, and come back. So instead, I parked at where she lived. Then eventually I went to the heritage place. One last comment about the place, her home place, or I need to look up what they actually called it. Plot in the Land place. The bookstore, that is the only bookstore where you can get a stamp of her signature. So everything you buy there, that you can also buy stuff online if you have any regrets after you leave, but it's the only place where you can get a stamp of her signature. So that felt really cool to get. One of the earliest memories Maud has is of her ancestors, her grandparents, her grandfather particularly, telling stories and admiring the act of storytelling. Also, there was a very famous shipwreck on the island, and that captain actually lived with them for a while, and she would just watch him from afar, note things down in her diary. It was a very pivotal memory for her of his storytelling of all his adventures at sea. And they actually still have the table where that captain would sit, and he would give money to his crew members. He gifted the family a piece of the wreckage, and that's also in the bookstore. There's also a mantle where you can see photos of what it used to look like with a tapestry like pinned to it, and so you can see the differences. Maud took that picture herself, and yeah, there's just a lot of hidden gems within that bookstore that, if you're very nice to the people who work there, they can explain those things to you. It's not very obvious. Like, for example, the table is like literally in use, which I think is really cool, and it just shows like the quality of furniture from back then. So yeah, you kind of have to like know these details to see them. They're not necessarily like labeled that clearly. You don't line up. Like, anyone can go into that bookstore. Actually, you don't need to pay for the tour to even see these things. So a lot of special little Easter eggs in there. So for the actual heritage place, I will say it is very like commercial feeling. I do think the museum did a really great job summarizing with the space that they had, and they have this whole wall of like all the different translated covers. There's a lot of quality here. Like, I really enjoyed that place, and I think it's well done, especially having read the biography, knowing the details. I think they summarized it best. But I will say the house that you walk through is roped off, so it's a little bit limited in what you can like go into and see. And two, they explain that it's set up not as it was, but how it is in the book. So this is supposed to be the house that inspired Green Gables. But the thing is while the Green Gables Museum, the house feels like it was, this house, if you had told me that it like burnt down 10 years ago and they rebuilt it in the imaginings of that time, I would believe you, because it does feel somewhat modern in a weird way. They describe that it's set up like the book, but the thing is, like, in some of the entryways, there's like crazy paisley wallpaper. I'm like, Marilla would never. there's no way that this would be like accurate to the book. And also, this could be me just being nitpicky as a reader, is that, especially as a kid, I did not picture an accurate house. So even though I think it's supposed to be immersive, like this is set up like the books, this is like a way you can enter the books. To me, it just didn't feel that way because the way I pictured the house was something that just like simply does not exist, and it wouldn't feel immersive to me. And also, to be clear, like I expected this, but just want to let you know that even though they label something as Lover's Lane or Haunted Wood, it is not actually that trail, which is understandable that like over 100 years later it wouldn't be the same trail, but you can just see in the pictures that she would take as Lover Lane change over the years. You can look ahead and know that that is not like the same. But the value is that you are in the woods that inspired so much of her writing of and also just gave her so much comfort in her life. She was just a huge nature lover, and I love that she was a nature lover but not necessarily like an outdoorsy explorer. Like I don't think she ever went camping. She just was a great appreciator, and so it's so beautiful to be still on that property. And from there I walked to her gravesite. That actually that took me by surprise as well, because normally I don't really like feel many things being where people are buried, but it is kind of surreal to just be there and just know that her remains are there. Just I don't know, it was a very like pivotal moment of realizing like I'm here on the island, this is where she lived, this is where she is, and I've been to all these historic sites. So I went to these places over the span of about 2 days. Some places you can visit faster than others. The Heritage Place is a little bit bigger, especially if you take your time reading the exhibits, that kind of thing. The Birthplace is pretty quick, but I decided to go to a newer museum, which is the Bidford place that is about an hour away from Cavendish, and it is not included in the package, but I got insider info. I feel like a l.m. Montgomery journalist, that I overheard that they are trying to get on the package list. So maybe currently, maybe in the future, they'll be part of that package, which I think would be great because it's very fitting. So this is where she lived for a year with a minister while she was working as a school teacher. It was one of her first teaching jobs. And what was so incredible about this is that you can go to the desk, to the window where she would started her writing journey. Teaching was a lot of work, but she still would get up early to do some extra writing because that is like really what gave her just energy for life. And she would write at that, looking out onto this beautiful lake, and just wonderful curated house. No ropes or anything like that. Tons of historic items in there, not necessarily related to l.m. Montgomery, but I still think just great for, the time, place. And it was just really cool to be in a place that was also well described in her diary. She thought this place was haunted because sometimes the doors would open and close. She lived in the biggest room because that is culturally like what the ministers do. They offer the guests like the biggest room. So she even commented in her diary, she's like, I have no idea why I'm in this huge room. And the tour guide was so incredibly kind. From there, I went to Lennox Island because I definitely wanted to explore more of the indigenous history of the island. I wasn't just there for the l.m. Montgomery stuff. I also just want to know more about this gorgeous place. Unfortunately, they weren't open for the season yet when I was going, and this was the very start of June. I'm pretty sure they were like opening the next week, but I still was able to drive onto the reservation, stop at the cultural center, see they did have some exhibits like outside, and I think it would be a really wonderful place to stop. And it is like 10 minutes away from the Bidford place, so then that's what makes it even more worth it, is that you can go to two tourist stops. Okay, let me talk about some of the food I had that were total highlights. There's this place called Cars, and it's an oyster bar, and I just have to say their staff was so kind. So I walked in and the guy was like, hi, welcome in, and I was just like, hey, just me. And he was like, not just you, never just you are everything. And he just was such a hype man. And I got oysters, and the view was just wonderful. I asked for a Bloody Mary, and she was like, up here we drink Caesars, so we want to give it a try. And I was like, sure. And it was wonderful. And that same guy from the start walked by, and he was like, you are living the life, because I had my oysters, I had my drink, I had the sun. Yeah, so it's just like such a great vibe there. The brunch and coffee place I talked about before is Tails and Tides Brunch and Bistro and Bookstore. Yeah, so recommend that place. I will say I had a hard time finding the right fit in Charlottetown for a restaurant. There are great restaurants there. It just is like very much steakhouse kind of vibes. There was a cool brewery looking place, and I do think there are really great food options, especially if you're going like as a date, as a whole group. But just as a solo traveler, I don't know, it was just kind of hard to find for me for like my age group. I don't know. Also weren't really any like fast casual places either, but there were like 4 bookstores. So I really, had fun walking through the downtown of Charlottetown. Of course, there's like tons of shops if that's your thing. Not really my thing, but still fun. And there's some other gift shops there too as well. So from there, I drove back through Cavendish to Trackety. And I just want to say the roads are really easy to drive on. There was never really like a buildup of traffic, and they were even doing construction in some parts, but they directed very easily, very smoothly. Really great driving. Never had any negative experiences to say about that. I stayed at a super cool Airbnb that is shipping containers, that it was like 3 stories, and it was so fun to explore because at the very top you could hang a hammock, and in the second one there was really fun chair to sit out on, and that's also like where the bed was. And then down below, great kitchen, and then also hot tub just right outside. And there was also a private feeling beach, so some of the locals would like pull up and bring their dog out for a walk or whatever, but I took solo walks on that bit of beach, and it was just a really great walk because it kind of like goes around the corner, and so you don't really like know what's around the corner, and so it's just like really fun to explore. And that was going to be my focus for kind of like decompressing after driving around, going to all these different sites, to let it settle in that I'm here and actually relax. Like I wanted to have a relaxing vacation. I really appreciate the Airbnb host for telling me that I was the only one there, so I just wouldn't have to like worry about if lights were on or off, or people, arriving late at night or that kind of thing. And he was a really friendly guy. I actually never met him in person, but he was just very, very nice. And he reminded me of the hammock to put on the 3rd story, because it's like set away, so you take it out and you string it up yourself. And the hot tub was just felt like luxury. It is a little bit in the middle of nowhere, so the nearest grocery store was like 45 minutes away. And I would but there is a restaurant that has really good like fish and chips kind of dining, and they also have live music. It's like Finn folk food, so that was like 10-15 minutes away, so very close. So after 2 nights there, I went to go drive down south to Cliffside Inn in that area, and this was going to be near where the ferry was, which I would take back to fly. It was too early in the season for the Sir MacPhail house to be open. This was a place where Maud in her very early 20s met with a high-ranking official who came to the island specifically to meet her when Anne of Green Gables, just the first book, originally blew up across Canada, and she became like an icon immediately. So he's like, I really want to meet this author, and they decided this would be the great place for them to meet. There's a really funny story of how they're talking, and he sits down in front of the outhouse, not realizing that's where he's sitting, and she starts acting weird, and he's like, she's trying to hold back laughter, just thinking about someone being trapped in there listening to their conversation, but it would be impolite for her to point that out due to their, hierarchy, their status difference. And so it's just a really fun story that she wrote in her diary about that. It's just like, I just kind of love the idea of that place of when she was so like youthful, so full of life, and just excited for the future, and in her love of the island. I decided just to take a drive by just to see, and the gates happened to be open. So there seemed to be like maybe like a summer camp going on there. There was a bus and some kids like off in the field. So I just quickly like parked my car, ran to just look at the exterior, just stayed on any kind of path. Like of course I did not try to like go in or anything like that. I just like looked from the outside, admired it, took a selfie to prove that I was there. And that's like really all that I wanted anyway. So it was just wonderful kind of luck that the gate just happened to be open a little bit earlier in the season. And when you drive there, it has the classic red dirt roads, and so yeah, it's a little bit like out of the way, but I think it would be worth it. I do think there's also like a restaurant there that possibly could be nice to eat. There's also like an old-timey town that is like supposed to be set up like a frontier town, go to the blacksmith or whatever, that is also in that very same area that looked cute. So the Cliffside Inn ended up being the most peaceful place that I stayed. That did catch me by surprise because it is a traditional bed and breakfast, so I thought, maybe that there would be other guests, or like talking to the host, just a little bit more emotionally draining than the second place I stayed where I didn't see anyone at all. But it it was just so wonderful just to hear the water just right out the window. I stayed in their bird's eye. I don't know. They're whatever. They're one of their rooms that looked out, and having the windows open and the breeze coming in. There's no beach access, but you can just easily just drive to one nearby. Obviously this is an island. And the host there gave me one of the best recommendations of places where to eat, which was Wheelhouse. The staff at that restaurant was also incredible, especially as a solo female traveler, of having a fun chat with my server. And from there, I just bopped around to a lot of different beaches. I went to this big one in Basin Head Provincial Beach, and I can tell that in the height of summer, so when I went, it was a little bit like dreary weather. It was my one day that had like a tiny bit of rain. Otherwise, got really lucky, especially for it being early in the season. But I could tell in like July and August, in like hot summer months, when their whole little like mini market is open, there's like places to get ice cream and food right by the beach, and there's like this big kind of like divot of where there's inner kind of like bay water that goes out into gorgeous sand and water. And so I just took a really nice walk, but I could tell that is a top place to go. There are also a lot of lighthouses that are 100% worth it. I went up into one. There's some others that I would drive to, like the Suris one I just drove to but didn't go up. That only cost maybe about like $10, I'd say, to access. And just the view is so gorgeous because you can just look back on the water and then on the forest. Just lovely. I kind of expected more restaurants in Suris. I might have missed them, partially because the road through it is very fast. It's hard to kind of like slow down. You really need to like pull over. It's not like some of the other country towns that you can kind of like meander your way through. But I did find this wonderful bakery that I had one of the best sandwiches of my whole life because the bread was so delicious. There's also a lot of like farmy roads, I'd say, like country roads that you can drive down to that I basically just didn't route anywhere. I was just watching maps, and I would just go down these long trails for like there was public access that you can just go to some other beaches, some other smaller state beaches, or whatever the equivalent to like a state beach would be. Like Sally's beach was a little bit smaller but lovely. I was there for the most part by myself. I also want to mention that I went for a few runs while I was there on the island, and I had so much fun doing that. It was really great to kind of just like get off the touristy path, I guess. The place that I did near the cliffside end was actually on the Confederation Trail because that was a 10-minute drive from where I was staying. So the Confederation Trail goes from like the edge of Prince Edward Island, I think all the way to Vancouver. Like I think it's some kind of like cross Canadian trail that you can go on. So I went and run on there, which was great. You go kind of through like a little bit of like farmlands a bit. Be aware, especially in that area, once it turns to night, there are a specific kind of like mosquito, some kind of bug that will bite, that come out only then. So either bring bug spray, just be advised, because as the sun, so I had no issues on my run, but as the sun was setting right as I got back, I got bit. My God, it was so itchy. I also ran along the Cavendish beaches, so gorgeous because of the sand dunes. So you can go out and it was just so satisfying after the run to just look out, and just also beautiful trails where the trees touch. It's giving Lover's Lane kind of thing. I also went to the PEI National Park and ran on a trail to Robinson's Island, and there is gravel, so it takes a lot of exertion, something that I really hadn't run on before. Totally worth it though, because you get to the island and they even have some historical placards about that area, that there was a hotel there. People would come and they would have stuff set up on those beaches, a lot of like miniature beaches. You can also just walk there. A lot of people would walk or bike, but people do, even though it's like a bike trail as well, I do want to encourage you that I saw plenty of walkers. I myself was one, had no issues. It would be so worth it to walk to. So when I was originally planning this trip, I mistakenly thought that there were two bridges, because the way that I still feel like vindicated that my confusion is like not my fault. Anyway, it's actually a ferry line on Google Maps that you do need to book. I was a little bit earlier in the season, so it was only limited times of like 7, 10, 12, that kind of thing. During the height of summer, it comes way more often. And so I did have to go to the 7 a.m. one because I had a 1 p.m. flight in Halifax. So I just needed to make sure that I was going to make it. But the Cliffside Inn is like 10 minutes away. So you just have to get there around like 6:30. I think they recommend like 30 to 45 minutes before. It's my very first time ever doing a drive on ferry, and it was actually a lot of fun. They keep it very straightforward. They just tell you exactly where to park to line up, when to get on the ship, when to stop, when to get out of your cars. You can walk up, and there's actually food that you can buy, especially even early in that morning. They had like brunch going, so then you just sit and it takes about an hour. It was really wonderful. It was nice to be able to be present leaving the island. I got kind of emotional at the end of my trip and just like watching it go. I was really happy to go home and so happy to have been there. It's just a lot of overwhelming feelings while I was there. It's fine. And that was pretty much the only day that it really truly rained. So it just started raining as I was leaving because, the island was sad to see me go as well. And then from there I drove, it's less time than when you take the bridge. So it was about 2 hours to the airport. I stopped for food on the way there, checked my car back in. The rental places are also like Halifax Airport again is small. So even though Prince Edward Island, that airport is small, Halifax is also like a little bit bigger, but still on the smaller side, which makes